is the turn of our colleague Joe Miller in order to share the session Human Networks, Combining Indigenous Knowledge, Nature-Based Solutions, and Ecosystem Services. So,
thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you very much. We're going to switch gears a little bit, but not too much, because we have, this topic has come up multiple times already today, and we want to really reemphasize the importance of broad knowledge in this avenues towards the Sustainable Development Goals, including human networks that combine indigenous knowledge, nature-based solutions, and ecosystem services. Our first speaker in this session is George Essegby of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research from Ghana. Dr. Essegby, you're online. Please go ahead and share screen if you need to. There he is. He's online. Let's wait for. Yeah. Take a stretch if you need to while he comes online.
Sorry, I didn't unmute.
There we
Sorry
go.
for that. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to share my please, can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Not your screen though.
Okay, so you can see it now. Please, can you see the screen?
No.
No. Okay, so let me just. All right, so let me just do the narration, the narrative to it. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm very privileged to be invited to speak at this session. I'm also from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, but this one is in Ghana and not in India. And it's my pleasure to share thoughts with you on the title Human Networks Combining Indigenous Knowledge, Nature-Based Solutions, and Ecosystem Services. And I'm speaking from the perspective of what I term the story of Abusian. Once upon a time, there lived Abusian in villages in all parts of the world. In Ghana, Abusian is the term for the traditional family of not just the parents and their children, but the uncles, aunties, cousins, and others of particular ancestral lineage. Extending the definition of Abusian into the biodiversity theme, Abusian is the collective of families living together, sharing broad genetic identities, and interacting with whatever ecosystem they find themselves in, and ensuring sustainability of the ecosystem's resources. To do this, over time, the Abusian came up with stories, fables, taboos, superstitions, and sometimes actual rules by which they live in their villages to create a certain level of harmony with the system. And these are all based on the indigenous knowledge that have accumulated over time, knowledge derived by intuition and by experiences of the lives they lived in the village. For example, if you go into fishing, they will tell you why not to fish in a particular river or in a particular lake, and that you may only fish by baskets only or by canoes without outboard motos. Or that you go into a particular forest, you are restricted to gathering firewood from only certain species, and you are not to touch big species such as the kapok tree, because these trees are considered sacred. But in practicality, these trees are the ones that gave solidity to the forest ecosystem. And so in restraining the cutting down of these trees, the sustainability of the forest ecosystem becomes actualized. So Ebusian enjoyed harmony with nature in their villages. Today, we all accept that we are living in a global village. If that is the case, then we should be living by the concept of Ebusian. Ebusian traversing widely across ethnicities, nationalities, race, and religion. I had a picture in my PowerPoint presentation, which unfortunately I'm not sharing, but it's a picture of a gathering that we had in one of our project implementation here in Accra. We implemented the project mainstreaming biodiversity information into the heart of decision-making, and my institute, the Science and Technology Policy Research Institute, collaborated with the United Nations Conservation Monitoring Center in Cambridge, UK, and also with SSUNGA, South African National Biodiversity Institute, and some other institutes in Uganda and Mozambique, and also in Europe. But that picture explains the diversity of the actors that have to come together to implement a project like this, all in contribution to the conservation, sustainable management of biodiversity that we have in Ghana. And it is that Ebusian concept we can extend to the rest of the world if we really want to achieve the vision of post-2020 global biodiversity framework, living in harmony with nature by 2050. It means we are halting the depletion of critical resources for our human lives, such as water, fishes, wood, and ensuring that all dimensions of ecosystem services play out naturally. There is provisioning, there is regulation, supporting, and sustaining of sustenance of our culture by our Ebusian concepts and in our various diverse ecosystems. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, our vision of harmony with nature is attainable once we understand ourselves as living in this global village as Ebusian, and we apply the tools of science to not only validate our intuitions, but also create and enable restoration of the resources that we have inherited over time for biodiversity. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I think I was seeing the slides in my head because you did a very visual presentation without the slides. So I really appreciate it. Now, I really would like to see the slides too. So thank you very much. That was inspiring. So now we're going to cross the South Atlantic to Uruguay. And Claudia, could you take it over, please? Claudia Romano.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to this important meeting. Especially, I want to thank you to the Spain teams, Lighting Ban Juan Miguel, very known for all Latin American and Caribbean countries. And of course, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a really significantly opportunity for me and for the other colleagues for the Latin American and Caribbean country that have been working in the generation of network in order to support the development of research infrastructure, having space to share information, point of view, policy, and activities that are happening in the different areas of the world. I would like to share with all of you some program, project, instrument that can strengthen the working in the different areas of the biodiversity and of the human network using different natural-based solution. I will try to share with you some slide that can reflect our work that we are doing in our continent. First of all, some of mechanisms or instruments that can help to all the different initiatives that we have in the region. We consider that will be very important use the multilateral, regional, bilateral, South-South cooperation, triangular and decentralized, of course, and try for all the things that you are talking about the necessary to strengthen the capabilities of the researcher, trying to obtain or trying to strengthen the capability, trying to scholarship or whatever. We have a lot of multilateral institutions around the world that can help us to strengthen our capability. Today, we heard the position of the UNESCO opportunity, but that is very important. And we have another international multilateral cooperation institution who are working together in different aspects. Some of you can see in this slide, the Essegby, that is very important network that we have in Latin American and Caribbean, plus Spain and Portugal, and OE, the Organization of Ibero-American States, that work together, especially in science and technology area. Of course, it's very important to mention the European, different European programs that can help us and that can support us to strengthen our capability, especially the Horizon Europe program. In this area, I want to highlight two aspects. One is the research infrastructure opportunity, and on the other hand, we can find in this opportunity in the cluster, especially some different topics about food, bioeconomy, natural resource, agriculture, environment, that this program is very important because open the opportunity to hold the country, not only the CELAC country, is the CELAC country, the Arabian country, the African country, that for that reason we consider that could be a good opportunity to use this instrument. The second one that I want to share with you is the LAC-NCP network. Why I want to say that I want to share with you that? Because it's an instrument that can support the international cooperation, because the participation of the CELAC countries in this project is low, and we want to increase the participation. Obviously, that all of the work, we don't do it alone. Necessary, we have to work together with different networks. For example, with Red Clara, that our colleagues mentioned, with Euraxia World, and with Euraxia Latin American, with CETEL, and with the EULAC Foundation, and with other programs and projects. We are making a different training around whole Latin American and Caribbean countries. As you can see in this slide, we work with different government authorities, and we do a lot of important activity to support to increase the participation of Latin American and Caribbean countries. In this, you can find some opportunity to support the aspect that our colleague of Ghana are mentioned 2 or 3 minutes ago. Most important for all the topics that we are talking in this meeting is very important the policy dialogue. The most policy dialogue that we have between the countries of the European and with the European Commission and with the CELAC countries is the senior official meeting. More knowledge, but the agronomy, senior official meeting. In this we have 4 pillars very important. The first is the research mobility, how to improve our capability around the European and the Latin American and Caribbean countries. The second one pillar is the research and the cooperation in research and infrastructure. The third one is the global challenge, particularly in health. And the fourth is innovation. And in this topic, but in other 2, but in this topic specific, you can find some meetings, some network that you can work together in the environment and with the different solution, natural basis solution. It's very important to share with you an interesting project that is funded by the European Fund, that is leading by Inmaculada Figueroa, that's called Resinfra project. That in this project that involves a lot of countries from Latin American side, but and the European side is and LifeWatch Eric is working because it's one of the 4 pilots that we are working together, trying to construct to make some sustainable action for the future. And another 3 pillars, one is the Insect Eating, another is the European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, and the fourth is the recap, the network of supercomputer center, computer with high prestige. In the other hand, the most important aspect that I want to mention is the policy dialogue, because if we are working all the very interesting presentation that we are doing this morning and in this day, is not possible to recognize if we don't have a very accepted by the politician. For that reason, we try to strengthen the capability in the highest level. Another thing that you mentioned, or is very important to share with you, is the working group of research infrastructure that Fernando Amestoy is in this meeting, and we try to strengthen the capabilities of the institution in this region, trying to make some change with the research infrastructure, and especially to share the best practices, the lessons learned, identifying not only in the European countries, it's necessary to share some specific best practice that we have in select country, and trying, of course, to coordinate the working group. In this, I want to mention some activity. For that reason, to share information is necessary to have all the open infrastructure that we have in our region, open access, infrastructure to can share the opportunity, to can share the capabilities, to can train to others, and to support them to trying to participate in different opportunities, especially in Horizon Europe, but not only in that. And trying to make this visible for the politician. Obviously, that all of our work, we need necessary to work with our network that have a lot of experience in our region and in the European region, but in the global region, around the world. This is some of the specific network and space that we try to put in the agenda, all this our work. Some main challenges for the success of biodiversity and climate change, we have necessary to continue working with the political actor. Why? Because if the political actor not are very sensitive about this topic, they don't put in the national agenda or international agenda. Trying to make the thematic more visible, coordinate, of course, the scientific work with the policymaker for our point of view is very important to try to work together and try to translate the languages of the research, trying to translate to languages of the politician, and trying to emphasize biodiversity and climate change into political agenda. Obviously, we have to necessarily work with all the national public institutions of the 33 Latin American and Caribbean countries. If we don't have their support or their motivate, if they don't want to work together with that, it's impossible to obtain the result that we want to have in this aspect. That's all. Thank you, and sorry I try to do my best with my English.
It's great to hear about all the networking in Latin America. It's very, very important. And I want to connect you to some of our GBIF network there too, because it's fantastic to hear all that work. Our final speaker in this session this morning is a video presentation. We're actually not leaving Uruguay. It's by Nicole Arbour of the Belmont Forum, which is hosted in Uruguay.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this important conversation. My name is Nicole Arbour, and I'm the Executive Director of the Belmont Forum. And although I can't be with you in person, I'm happy to be able to share a few words to join into this really important conversation, particularly as it relates to the human networks and the interactivity between within the communities that need to be part of this these discussions. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Belmont Forum is a tool or mechanism to foster a transdisciplinary community and to enable funding in international transdisciplinary research space around the themes of global environmental change. So that definitely speaks to biodiversity. It also speaks to the space around the Sustainable Development Goals and climate change more broadly. It's a coalition of the willing, so it brings together funding organizations and was born out of necessity, recognizing that money doesn't cross borders very well. So what we do is we allow the different funding organizations to come together, but to operate within the existing institutional policy frameworks or structures that they live in. The mechanism that has been developed is very flexible. So while members basically lead the charge or set the direction of travel for the Belmont Forum Collaborative Research Actions, which is the other word we use for call for proposals. Any funders can participate in areas where there is a mutual priority. And so what this allows us to do is create a space where there is increased flexibility for the international funding for the international research community to come together. So the challenge that we're all working towards is the challenge of, as I mentioned, understanding transdisciplinary research that provides knowledge for understanding, mitigating, and adapting to global environmental change. And that is, within that context, it's also capacity building within the greater community itself, because within the context of academia, we don't necessarily provide foundational training for societal engagement. And also society doesn't always understand how to engage with the research community. And so we created, or we've strived to create a system with the flexibility that allows us to work across and within different policy and funding environments, across different financial years, and within different community goals. So really convening many of these discussions. So what is transdisciplinary research? I mean, this is a term that is more and more common, but is still a fairly new piece of vocabulary, if you will. But essentially, from our perspective, we're looking at research with, by, and for the community, keeping stakeholders very broadly defined and bringing together partners from across natural sciences, social sciences, and stakeholder groups, with stakeholders varying from policymakers and government officials to indigenous communities and NGOs and members of the public. Basically, it starts from this idea that relevant and affected stakeholders should all be involved, not only in the engagement and definition of the problem case, but also be part of the process and help develop the solutions so that there is that co-ownership, not only of the project, but of its outcomes. Because in that context, the outcomes are more likely to be accepted by the community because they were co-developed with those who are benefiting from those outcomes. It also helps bring legitimacy to these conversations where we don't have people swooping in from the top and telling communities what they need, because, you know, there's a lot of history that shows that not only does that not work and is that not successful, but in that context, we're not always right. And sometimes those who have come in with the best of intentions don't see all of the perspectives needed to create a solution that is going to be effective for all of the people in that discussion. So in the context of biodiversity, transdisciplinarity is essential. It allows us to speak to and inform policy development. So if the policymakers are involved from the outset, it helps us to identify the problems that need to be engaged with. They're part of the solution as the project develops. It allows us to co-develop, work with, and help find solutions to real-world, societally relevant problems faced by on-the-ground stakeholders, including indigenous communities. And we also strive to create safe and neutral spaces to engage in these conversations, thinking about the challenges associated with the different power dynamics, building legitimacy for all of the voices involved in the conversation. So how do we do this? Well, we do this, as I mentioned earlier, through the development of what we call collaborative research actions or calls for proposals that will allow us to help accelerate the delivery of this environmental research needed to remove critical barriers to sustainability by aligning and mobilizing international resources, but also coordinating that international stakeholder base, right? Whether it be the social scientists, the natural scientists, or the stakeholders. So for every project that goes through a Belmont Forum process, we need there to be social scientists, natural scientists, and stakeholders optimally involved right from the beginning, the inception of the project all the way through to the end. So you're really producing a societally relevant result. But the Belmont Forum is about more than just funding research. It's also about fostering that transdisciplinary community of practice. So each collaborative research action brings together all of the projects in that community in 3 meetings: the kickoff meeting, where all the projects come together to discuss what they're doing and to share with one another, and then again at the midterm meeting and the end term meeting. And the idea here is also to create cross-links between the projects, between the researchers, additional spaces for collaboration. There's also a variety of different pieces depending on the collaborative research action that come in the coordination, but this is all really designed to think about how do we work more effectively in these spaces that are not always your traditional spaces to reach into. And we're also working to bring that community together in other ways. So we convene the Sustainability Research and Innovation Congress, which is an annual event that is aimed at continuing and fostering that transdisciplinary dialogue, sharing best practice and speaking to some of the challenges associated in bringing all of these parties together and finding ways to fund them all so that we're engaging in these trust spaces effectively. And so with that, I'm going to hand the microphone, if you will, back to our moderator and encourage you to not only look at the Belmont Forum website, but reach out if you have any additional questions. This is a really important conversation, not only for biodiversity, not only for the Sustainable Development Goals, for all of global change research. And Belmont Forum is very happy to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have heard 3 lovely talks there talking about different levels or ways of engaging in human networks, and even a mechanism on the end there of how we can engage. So, and I think all of us around the table and on Zoom are part of these various networks, and we certainly want to expand those networks and include as broadly as possible. I think that ends our session before at least a lunch break here in New York. So, and we're pretty much on time, and we will reconvene the same Zoom link in basically 1 hour and 5 minutes. So thank you, everyone, our speakers for the first half of the session, and please come back in 1 hour for the second half. Thank you all.